What is Christianity?
Well, to answer that, we got to go way back to the beginning of time. Well, actually, the time that I'm referring to is before time even existed. Now, in this time, there was literally nothing other than God, who exists outside the boundary of time. So God didn't like all this nothingness, so he decided to make all this nothingness into somethingness. This somethingness was the universe and everything in it: galaxies, stars, planets, animals, everything. And he called it good. But when he made his last creation, humans, he called them very good. All was perfect. Well, that's until humans rebelled against God after being deceived by the devils and entering humanity, God kicking humans out of his presence for disobeying him. Yeah, the train really fell off the rails here. Now picture this. In this hypothetical situation, there's a judge and a criminal who has broken numerous laws, such as murder, robbery, and many others. The judge sentences him to death as he has done much wrong because he has disregarded the authority of the government. Now, is this judge corrupt? Of course not. Rather, he is showing how just he is by revealing how serious he is about the law by giving the criminal the death penalty. Now imagine that this judge represents the character of God, and the criminal us, committing sin or wrongdoings that disobey what God tells us to do, just like the criminal committing crimes, going against what the government says. God would have been fully just to wipe us out when we first disobeyed him, yet he decided not to. Not because he isn't just, but because God has two natures, a just one and a loving one, and God wants both to be fulfilled. If he killed us off, his just nature would have been satisfied, but his loving nature wouldn't have. Now, how would his loving nature and just nature be satisfied simultaneously? Well, we'll see the answer to that later on. Many years passed, and God sent prophets to his chosen people, the Israelites, with whom he made covenants with, or promises. These prophets tried to lead the Israelites back to God, but the Israelites often strayed away. People continued in their sin for much time, not wanting God. The world pretty much just continued to get darker and darker until one day an amazing thing happened. Jesus was born. Now, you've probably heard of this Jesus guy before. I mean, he is basically the most famous person to have ever lived. But culture has radically altered our view on Jesus, making him into this nice blonde white guy with blue eyes dressed in a white robe who tells nice stories. Yeah, this ain't it, Chief. The actual Jesus was Middle Eastern, relatively poor, kind, but still straight to the point and did not hesitate in pointing out evil. Oh, yeah, and one more thing. He's God. So now that we see who Jesus was, we can now see what he did and why he did it. So basically, Jesus would go around and preach to people about God and that he was God and the only way to heaven. Some religious leaders didn't like this and they said it was blasphemy, which they would have been right if he wasn't literally God in the flesh. So they tried to kill him again and again and again. He did not get killed though, and he continued on in his ministry with his disciples or followers. He also prophesied to his followers that he would one day die and come back from the dead. Later, one of Jesus' disciples got a sneaky idea to make a deal with the Pharisees to hand over Jesus for 30 shiny pieces of metal. Jesus was then handed over to the Pharisees and was sentenced to death by crucifixion. He died after about 6 hours on the cross and was soon afterwards put into a tomb sealed by a large stone to make sure no one could steal his body. Many were shaken by his death and were thrown into fear, until 3 days later, he rose from the dead. Many know about this event, but don't know its meaning. Let's draw this back to our analogy. So, again, the criminal is being put to death because of his crimes. Now imagine a man steps forward to the criminal and says to him that he will take his place for the death penalty, and he just has to accept the offer and dedicate his life to obeying the government. Now, this may not be how our legal system works, but it's very similar to how God's system works. By accepting what Jesus did on the cross for us and by dedicating our lives to him, we are able to be saved from the punishment that comes from our sin. There is nothing we can do to earn this salvation, as it is only through Jesus' grace that we may receive our salvation. Now I have one question for you. Will you accept his invitation?